All right, I'm going to get started, and people will be rolling in as the time goes on. So thank you for coming on time and welcome. Whoop, let me turn down my music. That was the chill music for fall. Welcome to navigating the first steps through perimenopause. And the most important thing right now is that this next hour is going to be about you. I would love to know one thing that you want to walk away with that will make this time together a success. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you post a message, just send a DM to Coach Michelle Farrell. So she's going to be my moderator, kind of aggregating any questions and any comments that you might have, so that at the end I can answer it, or to make sure that things that you want covered, hopefully I can answer it during this hour. So yeah, Michelle just did a little wave. And if you guys send that to her, that would be great, because I want to make sure it is a success for you in the next hour. And these are the goals for our webinar today. Number one, symptoms. We'll be going over symptoms of perimenopause, so that you know that you're not going nuts, and also what you might expect might happen. And remember, it's a little bit different for every woman. Medical allies. And this is a really important part that we're covering today, that we're going to do together. We're going to create a local list of doctors who are menopause certified. And then the last part of our goals is we're going to touch upon two other important pillars, the next two steps. Besides physiology, these are important for you to make the next few years easier and set you up for a strong foundation for postmenopause, which all of us will get to. So just a big overview. There are three pillars that I call in the perimenopause pyramid in terms of getting through this time of our lives, and focusing on these three parts is going to be really important. And today we're going to be touching upon the big step, which is physiology, so that you can leave with a good understanding of what you need to do next. And focusing on the three parts overall is going to make your personal experience much less frustrating, because it also sets you up for your new hormonal normal post-menopause. And just a heads up, before the Q&A at the end of the webinar, I'm going to be inviting you to a small group 12-week Pivot into Perimenopause Mastermind. And it's not mandatory. This is just for anyone who feels like they need a lot more guidance or accountability to cover the three perimenopause pillars that I'm going to be covering today. So it's for someone who probably needs a little bit more structure because they're overwhelmed with work and family obligations, especially those who put everyone else's health and wellness first. That's who I created the mastermind for. So I know that some of my clients, it can be hard to focus on health, their own health, and between their career and family. So this is an outline of what's going to happen today so that you know exactly what we're going to be covering. And the goal of the webinar is for you to walk away with tangible knowledge on how to advocate for yourself and take the most friction-filled step, which I think is finding the right doctor to be your ally, because that's going to be your first line of person to ask questions to. So let me share a little bit about myself. I am Coach Tina Tang, and I'm 52. I'm post-menopause. And I went through my whole perimenopause journey literally in the dark. And it probably started in my 40s, probably around when I was 47. And my period was coming every 2 to 3 weeks. And when I went to see my gynecologist, because I thought something was really wrong, like, how am I getting it every 2 weeks? His thought was, oh, maybe you have some polyps, because that sometimes causes bleeding, assuming that that was why the bleeding was happening so soon. And after a few visits, he said, we should schedule polyp surgery. And he didn't do the surgery, but his colleague did. And afterwards, she was like, I didn't find anything. And the erratic periods continued. And then other stuff was happening to me at the time. And of course, since my mom never discussed what happened to her, so I had no idea that, what I was going through. I noticed things like my hair was thinning, and I just assumed, oh, that's just stuff that happens when you get older. And then 2 years after my periods were going wacky, I stopped being able to sleep. I was visiting my parents one summer, and on that first night, I was just lying there wide awake. So, I know we've all had stuff like that. But then the next night I was like, well, maybe I'll just be so exhausted, I'll fall asleep. And then I didn't. And literally for months, I just had little to no sleep. And it was exhausting and also full of anxiety, because I'm sure if you've had sleepless nights, you start thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get dementia. And you just start catastrophizing. And it's very normal, because it's like lack of sleep and the anxiety. So I tried everything from, people like, oh, take magnesium. And then that probably worked for a month. And then I tried CBD oil. I tried tart cherry juice, because there's research showing that helps you sleep. I tried ashwagandha. And so desperate and totally exhausted, I went to go see my primary care doctor, and he prescribed Ambien. And I don't know if anyone's tried Ambien, but Ambien, you become addicted to Ambien a little bit physically and also psychologically. So essentially, when you start taking Ambien, you won't be able to sleep without it, because you literally think, if I don't take my Ambien, I'm not going to sleep. So after like a lot of research and appointments with a sleep psychologist and a pulmonologist, I was able to get off Ambien and find sleep using something called CBTI, which it stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia. And it's actually what the American College of Physicians recommends as the #1 thing to go to before supplements or drugs when you're having sleep issues. But the thing is, my primary care doctor obviously was not updated on all the current research and all those things, so he didn't even suggest that. And my gynecologist also did not. Neither of them said you must be going through perimenopause. And it's only in retrospect, from the knowledge that I know now in trying to figure all that stuff, when I was operating in the dark for all those years, I know that I was basically experiencing common symptoms of perimenopause. And the awful thing is, neither my gynecologist at the time nor my primary care doctor said, you know what, I think you're in perimenopause. And I was at the classic age, like everything should have pointed to that, but none of them said that. So needless to say, neither of them are my current doctors. I found different ones that are menopause educated, which is what we're going to go through today. So obviously, had I known that it was only perimenopause and not some like serious disease, which I kept thinking I had, I wouldn't have suffered for those 3 years thinking something was wrong with me. And no one I knew ever talked about stuff like that. Like not my mom. Like I only talked to my mom about it after going through it. She was like, "Oh yeah, I went through that at the same age." But it's just not part of society to discuss stuff like that. And that is why I created this webinar as well as the Pivot into Perimenopause Mastermind, because I don't want you to be anxious, feel alone, or in the dark during this like very normal time in a woman's life. So I want to talk about it so that menopause and perimenopause is a normal thing and that we all know what to expect and what we should expect from our doctors. So let's go on to the next slide. Now, the question is, I'm sure I used to say, I was like, well, why are we getting symptoms? And this graph perfectly illustrates why we get symptoms. So as you can see, there's two hormones, estradiol and progesterone. Estradiol is also known as estrogen. So when we're in childhood, you can see that there are low levels. It starts ramping up in our adolescence. And then in our reproductive years, which is in your 20s and 30s, or maybe even a little bit before your 20s, even though the two hormones you can see fluctuate, there's a pattern, there's a predictable pattern. And here in perimenopause, which is on average like 40s, 50s, you can see how the hormones are no longer predictable. The movement is very erratic. And then when you get to menopause, this is really post-menopause, everything goes into a new low level. So this is why we feel symptoms. This wacky, erratic fluctuation is what's causing the symptoms. And let's go on to here. And I wanted to share some famous people. So it's like, oh, even they go through this too. So I don't know if you've seen recently, Oprah's talked about her menopause experience. Her symptoms started when she was 48 and she didn't have any hot flashes. So that's why she didn't suspect she was going through perimenopause. I wrote down what her three main ones were: heart palpitations, had menopause brain or forgetfulness. And when I write dull mood, she described it as it just kind of felt like life just kind of lost its color. So I wouldn't say she described it as depression, but it just was blah. And I just put one of her quotes on there, how she didn't suspect perimenopause because she never had a hot flash. And me neither. I never had a hot flash. And that's what everyone thinks about for perimenopause. And she went to 5 different doctors, like because she had the heart palpitations. There, as you can see, one of the female doctors gave her heart medication, gave her an angiogram. And it was herself that figured out, oh, I'm in perimenopause. And then eventually she went to her gynecologist and went on hormone therapy. And a lot of her main symptoms disappeared after she went on hormone therapy. I'm not saying this is as like that's for everyone, but is an example of how your symptoms are not going to be necessarily what we all think of them. And Amanda Thebe, she might not be the celebrity in the typical world, but she's a well-known trainer. And she wrote a book called, let me see if I can pronounce it right, Menopocalypse. Now, I put her on there because what makes her story interesting, her book is literally about her experience of perimenopause, and she started in her early 40s. And so that's why when doctors are like, no, you're too young. No, it's not too young. So around her 43rd birthday is when she started experiencing those two things, debilitating depression. And she described in her book, because I read her book, where debilitating depression, she's a very upbeat person, but she would come home from work and literally just start crying and then just didn't want to ever leave. She was very social. She didn't want to do anything out in terms of, she's an extrovert who only wanted to be an introvert during her perimenopause time. So I like the quote. It's like one of her biggest problems she experienced was feeling isolating, thinking nobody would understand what she was going through. And nobody did, because with her symptoms, also no hot flashes, she didn't think anything was wrong. And I mean, she knew something was wrong. All the doctors she went to, specialists, to try to figure out what was going on, tried all these tests. And it was only at her annual gynecologist exam when he was like, oh, how's it going? And she described all her symptoms. He's like, you're going through perimenopause. And that's when she was able to get the proper treatment for these things that were affecting her daily life. So if you could, we're going to make this very private, but I would love to know if you've been experiencing any symptoms, how long you might have had them, or if you've seen your doctor, what they said. And to keep it more private, or we're going to send, if you can, a little DM to Coach Michelle, because later on we'll talk about that. So if you feel comfortable, just send her a little note, and she's going to keep everything anonymous. And at the end, we'll be talking about everything anonymously. I'll give you a chance if you guys want to send her a little message. And I wanted to add on that when I started talking about this webinar on social media, I got a lot of DMs about things that people are experiencing. So I think it's helpful to share with each other, because sometimes it feels like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Like the thing with the thinning hair, I had never even asked my doctor about it. And I eventually found out, like, oh, that's a normal thing. And then I asked my gynecologist about it, and she gave me a suggestion of what to do. So she was not surprised. So it's sometimes knowing what the symptoms are is helpful for you, so you know who to ask, and basically who to ask. And if the person knows what they're doing, the medical ally, they will give you an answer. So just a reminder for you, when you send, if you're going to send messages about some of the things that you went through, I'm going to describe what I went through. So for me, it was insomnia, not related to hot flashes. I had erratic periods. I had thinning hair. And then this part no one ever talks about, but basically, I don't know how to say it nice, your vagina gets dry. And when I've commented on this before, I've had people DM me like, oh my God, mine feels like sandpaper. So I want you to know on this, that is actually normal, and there is a remedy for that. But we can mention that later. So let's go on to, these are the top 3 symptoms that people complain about, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen to you. Number 1, which is going to be annoying for most people, is weight gain. And when I say weight gain, a lot of times people think, oh, well, you just have to, it's because someone hasn't been, on their exercise. But literally, I've had women say, my exercise and food have been the same, but suddenly it feels like I'm putting on weight and I just can't shake it off. And just so you know, like for obesity medicine doctors, their number 1 clients are women in perimenopause. So it's definitely a thing. The second very common symptom is a hot flash or a night sweat. And those are the ones we know about because people talk about it. It's the stereotype of a woman in perimenopause. It is very common, but I wanted to point out that not every woman is going to have a hot flash. Like I said, I've never had a hot flash or a night sweat. I just have other symptoms. And a third one that is common, but people maybe also don't discuss, is a mood swing. And when I say mood swing, I mean mood swings where you're like, that's not normally me, and this keeps happening. Like with Amanda Thebe, being an extrovert, all of a sudden not wanting to leave her house anymore is, a definite change in her mood. Some people were like, oh yeah, I remember when I was a teenager, my mom would have a really short fuse. And now when you're older, you're like, oh, she was going through perimenopause. So those are examples, like someone who's maybe you start feeling irritable a lot easier. You might feel the blahs. You might just feel depressed, and you're normally not someone who feels depressed often, or just feeling a lot more anxious than normal. And let's go to the next one. So these are some other symptoms. And the crazy thing is, as I wrote there's like more than 72 symptoms. And it seems kind of wacky because you're like, well, then how am I going to diagnose it? You have to remember that we're all different people, right? Where we experience things differently. And so these are some of the symptoms. Sorry, I lost my page, that you may or may not experience, and that you will hear people complain about, is the insomnia, which I talked about. And insomnia actually means you're waking up throughout the night and not able to fall asleep, or you're waking up super early and you can't fall back asleep. And oftentimes it becomes a vicious cycle. Achy joints or joint pain, and it's because the hormones that we're talking about actually do affect so many things, including our muscle and bone. decreased libido, which no one ever talks about, but that is a thing. And it's not because the woman's, it just, your hormones affect your libido, but also at this time in your life, a lot of people have been in a long-term relationship. So some of it is just like you've known someone for a long time and then you got hormone changes. The vaginal dryness is also a thing that affects the decreased libido because if it becomes painful to have sex, which it can be with when your vaginal lining is a lot more dry because of the estrogen fluctuations and eventually the estrogen decline. Headaches, like even when women are not in perimenopause and they're having their normal periods, hormone fluctuations for some women cause like migraines or headaches. You might have inexplicable fatigue. The forgetfulness, this is a term you'll hear people talk about, menopause brain, and women who are pregnant will get pregnancy brain. And this is also related to hormones. And then I mentioned the thinning hair and the heart palpitations. And there's a lot more. Like I was just trying to grab like ones that I hear about more often or that, you know, I've experienced. So as I was saying, it's hard to, I can see why sometimes doctors are not sure because it is hard to diagnose. It's not like A, B, and C, you're in perimenopause. Like everybody's body's a little different. Just as when we were teenagers, not all of us got the periods at the same time. Not all of us developed at the same time. You know, you had pimples, you had moods. So everyone's experience is a little different. And no woman is going to have the same severity or list of symptoms. So I wanted to go over this because this is important in trying to figure out, am I going through perimenopause if the symptoms are a little different for everyone? So first, let's talk about what menopause is. I know that term is thrown around a lot. Menopause is defined as 1 full year, 365 days of not getting your period. So on that 365th day, that's menopause. I think Laura Lacey's in here. She had a great post today that said, menopause is really just 1 day. After that 365th day of not having the period, the next day, you're postmenopause. So for example, let's say January 1st of this year, 2023, I didn't have my period. I was supposed to have it. And then a year goes by and now it's January 2nd, 2024. I would be officially postmenopause on January 2nd, 2024. So what I wrote here is the average age of menopause. That means your average age of that last day of the full year of no period. In America, it's 51. So by 51, the average age, the woman's not getting a period anymore. She's now considered postmenopause. So what does that mean for perimenopause? Because we hear that term thrown around a lot because you're like, oh, I'm in perimenopause. Perimenopause is that transition before that last day of the full year of no periods. And here's where it's a little different for everyone. It can last 2 years. So that means if we think average age is 51, someone could start having perimenopause at 49, and then by 51, she's done. Or it can last 10 years. So that means you could be 41 when you start feeling symptoms. And by the time you're done and have no more periods, you'll be 51. So that's why you can be in your early 40s and start feeling perimenopause symptoms. And I just wrote down the average amount of time for a lot of people is 4 to 5 years. So what that means is usually around 45, 46, you start feeling it, but that does not mean that you're not going to feel anything in your early 40s. So it's still definitely possible. So if you start feeling symptoms and you're around this age group, you can think of perimenopause as a possibility. Let's go on to, oh yes, this one, because there's so many shills out there. So if you see online or some health influencer saying to you, pay for this hormone test to see if you're in perimenopause, an example would be like the Dutch test. Will that tell me I'm officially in perimenopause? And also, if you have a doctor that says your hormone panels show that you're not in perimenopause, the answer is no. A hormone test is merely a snapshot in time. So if your hormones are fluctuating erratically, that snapshot will not be accurate to test for it might be accurate for other things, but not as an official test for perimenopause. The only thing that's going to be your test of perimenopause is your erratic menstrual cycles. That's the most obvious sign that your hormones are fluctuating. So it could mean that your cycles are coming further and further apart, like every 35 days, every 40 days, or it could be, well, like what happened to me. I would get it every 2 weeks. Every 14 days, my period would come. And for some people, it could mean heavier flows. Like, for example, I have a couple of clients that they're experiencing flows that they haven't had since their college days. And it can be annoying because you're like, I keep changing pads. But these are examples of your period no longer being predictable or regular. And the change from the past years of what you're used to for your body is your number one sign and symptom of perimenopause. Again, just to like illustrate, you saw this graph earlier, but this is just to also give you the visual. This, your periods being wacky, is your number one sign that you're going through perimenopause. So you don't have to buy any of those so-called tests like perimenopause tests because they are not accurate. And let's talk about like why are we know why we're feeling symptoms of fluctuations, but like why in terms of the hormones. So the decline of both estrogen and progesterone can cause, symptoms, but it's predominantly estrogen, as I wrote down there, that has the more significant impact on the symptoms. And I wanted to give you a little visual as to the role estrogen plays in your body, because we normally think of it as when you're getting periods, when you're going to get pregnant, but it blows my mind. Like, I guess the body's amazing in that, of course, this one hormone is not going to only just do two things. It's in our body. It's going to do many things. And these are some of the many things that estrogen has a role in. So the top one here, thermoregulation, means it manages your body temperature. Like, when you start sweating and when you start feeling hot, because estrogen is fluctuating, your thermoregulation becomes a lot more sensitive. That's why we get hot flashes and night sweats. So what our body thinks is, oh, it's hot now, and it starts making you sweat, is why that happens. The second one I wrote down is bone density. This is a big one, and this is why after menopause, about 60% of women over 50 end up having osteopenia or osteoporosis. Osteopenia means low bone density. It's like the precursor to osteoporosis. And it is because of a decline in estrogen, and why you have to change your food and your fitness, because this is just going to happen naturally because of the hormone changes. Our estrogen also has a role in our heart health, from the blood vessels to the cholesterol levels. And this is also why heart disease is the number one killer of women, as in the number one thing women die from is heart disease. And this estrogen definitely plays a role in that, because we have a lot less in our body. In terms of cholesterol, it also helps regulate our levels of cholesterol. And I think my friend is in here. She started noticing change in her cholesterol levels, and I did too. And then the doctor that I had that was not menopause, was like, oh, your cholesterol is going up. But then when I remembered this, I was like, okay, it's because of that. But it still means we have to adjust our food intake. Estrogen also affects skin elasticity. So when people think like, why is my face like, why am I getting wrinkles? Thank you, estrogen. It has an effect on that. And that's also what affects your vaginal tissue health, why it gets drier in the vagina. Not everyone, but a lot of women get that. It affects mood regulation. That's what we're talking about, how during this time, people experience different mood shifts. And then the big one is fat distribution. It has a role in how your energy, in other words, calories, is stored and where it's stored in your body. So are you feeling like this now? Okay, Tina, so I know I'm in perimenopause. What do I do about these annoying symptoms? I know it sounds terrible, like all these things you're going through, but don't worry, we do have help. So I like to break it down into 3 pillars of perimenopause. And these are the 3 things to focus on in order to improve your passage through perimenopause and to set your health foundation up for a new hormonal normal post-menopause. And this is the foundation I also use for my 12-week pivot in perimenopause mastermind, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So let's go straight into this. So in today's webinar, we are focused on the top of the pyramid, which is physiology. And what's physiology? And when I say that, I mean it's understanding what your symptoms are and why they're happening. So knowing that you're going through perimenopause. And this information is really important because it allows you to know what and when you need to talk to, I call it medical ally, because we all have doctors, but not all doctors are going to be really on your side in terms of making you feel better and understanding what you're going through. And this is the pillar that we're focusing on in this webinar, because I find it's the barrier to understanding how to care for yourself right now. And examples were like my insomnia. Had I known it was due to perimenopause, I probably would have asked different people and taken different routes to try to remedy that. Or even with Oprah's heart palpitations, she went to heart doctors and all these things, but it took her gynecologist to tell her, or she figured it out and then went to her gynecologist about it. So that's also why it's the first priority I dive into in my 12-week mastermind. So let's talk about this. So in understanding your symptoms and whether you need to talk to your menopause certified practitioner is going to be really vital for your quality of life. And like I wrote down, it's crazy because I thought it was 34, but it's actually more than 72 symptoms. And the ones I have here are ones that are probably more well-known, but remember, everybody's body's different. With the insomnia, let's see, even though it just sounds like insomnia, that literally affects your daily life. Like you're waking up, you feel exhausted all day. Like all of these really are things that when it gets to a level that affects your daily comfort or your mental health, you really want to have someone help you with that. So this is why understanding your physiology is going to be important for advocating for yourself. And oftentimes, and I know this from just clients or people who've messaged me when I talk about this, that a lot of doctors, if they're not menopause educated, are going to tell you that you're just fine. And if you don't feel fine, you're not just fine. And there's no need for you to suffer through symptoms that deeply affect your work, your state of mind, or your comfort. And for everyone, that's going to be a different level, but you need to have someone to help you. I wanted to share this so that you have an idea of like a couple people who had sent me messages, but I wanted to show so you can see how a lot of doctors may not be menopause educated. So in this one, this is a client of mine who she's 43. And as you can see, she texted me, she's like, my OB says I'm too young to be in perimenopause, but she sent me a copy of her cycle. Look at her cycle, right? It's no longer regular, and she's 43. She's had 2 kids. She knows what's regular. So, and then the second one, I don't know if she is on the webinar right now, but she's shared some of the things that's going on for her, that she keeps forgetting stuff. I have that too, like just, basic things. You're like, what is wrong with me? You think I thought I was going through early Alzheimer's. Who knew it was menopause brain? And here she talks about she's 53. She's still getting her regular periods, but they've changed. So that's the key thing. So her periods are coming, but they've changed. And her OBGYN is telling her, be patient and suck it up. Now, if you're having your daily life be affected by some symptoms, I don't find that that's the right answer. You're going to have to find a doctor that will help you through symptoms that affect your comfort and your daily life. So as I said, today, we're going to go over physiology, which we have been talking about symptoms. And having a Menopause Society certified doctor is going to be so crucial in this part of life. I wish I had figured it out sooner and made my change a lot sooner. I'll touch upon the other 2 pillars, which are really going to be important in making lifelong health changes for what's going to be your new normal. But right now, we need to ensure that you have a medical ally who's going to listen, who's going to understand exactly what you're going through and give you the proper treatment and remedies. So just to cover on the other 2 before we get into the doctor part, the other 2 pillars of perimenopause, food and fitness, are foundational things, and they're going to and it takes time. And these are going to affect your perimenopause journey in terms of the severity, in changing the way you do food and fitness is also going to help you produce some lifelong positive effects. So, when you see your doctor, you might get medical treatments for certain symptoms like hot flashes. For that, it's something hormone therapy is often used for, but that also can be helped through food and fitness. So a more holistic approach to it. You need all of it. And that's something that I'm going to go over in the mastermind too, because it can be hard to make some of these big changes on your own. So this is an illustration of how, besides talking to your doctor, how your food and fitness can affect other symptoms. Let me see, I'm just going to pull it. For example, the biggest ones that stand out for me is muscle loss, bone density, joint pain. In there, fitness is definitely, when I say fitness, I mean strength training or just movement is going to help with that, because that's something that just taking a drug is not going to help you with alone. In terms of like all the symptoms, what you do in your holistic life, and when I say that, I mean physically and nutritionally, are going to really affect the severity of your symptoms. Along with that will help along with what you work on with your doctor. Let's go here. So we're going to get to one of our webinar goals together. And right now, I hope you guys logged on with your computer. We're going to create a list of 5 to 10 local doctors who are menopause certified. And what I'm going to have you do is, if you can open up, I'm going to switch over. You don't have to, but I think this is the most friction-filled step. I know it is. If you can get started on this together with me, you will feel much better, because then at least you feel like I took the first steps. So we go and tell you what you're going to do. In your search engine together, I want you to type in menopause.org. So when you type that in, we're going to get to this screen called the North American Menopause Society. And I know I keep talking about them. I want you to know they're not paying me and I'm not soliciting. They're a nonprofit. They educate doctors. They educate gynecologists on all the current research in terms of menopause and how in women's health. So if you guys have pulled that up, I want you to go to the For Women section. And then under there, I put a little arrow, find a menopause practitioner. So once you click through that, you'll get to a place where it's going to ask you for your zip code. And I would either set your settings, depending on where you live, like 1 to 5 miles. For me, I had set it for 1 mile because the New York, New Jersey area is actually quite condensed. And then I'm going to talk about, and you're probably still going to have a fairly large list, but I wanted to go over some of the acronyms so that you can understand what you're looking for. So this list is for me locally. And the one I actually circled, Dr. Denisha Potter-McQuilkin, I'm going to have her as one of the speakers in the mastermind to help people. But I wanted to give you, I circled that so you could see what some of these acronyms mean. So you're going to get a list of doctors. If you're looking for a new gynecologist, you're obviously going to be looking, one of the acronyms is going to be MD for physician. These other ones I wrote out just so you can you don't have to search it out, just try to make your life easier. The NCMP, which you'll see here, that means they've got the menopause certification and they have extra education. And just so you know, because we oftentimes think of doctors as experts, most med schools cover about an hour on menopause. Whereas when they go into specializations like OBGYN, they get a lot more when it comes to, having babies, but that's basically it. So it's not necessarily the doctor's fault. Any doctor that has more menopause education went out of their way to get menopause certified. And this society does that. So if you see NCMP, which is here, that means they have the menopause certification, or NAMS member, which means the North American Menopause Society member. And I wrote down this other one because Dr. Potter-McQuilkin has an FACOG. I know so many acronyms. Essentially, it means not only is she board certified, she's met all this extra criteria in keeping abreast of the latest medical guidelines, treatments, and techniques for women's healthcare. She happens to have this too. So depending on what you're looking for, so if I was looking for a gyno, I'd be looking for at least MD and then the NCMP. So everyone's like, got their list. So I want you to have cut and paste maybe 5 to 10 names, or at least bookmark the page so you know where to go back to. But as you can see, you can pick it by location and zip code. And this step is very important because then we're going to go on to the next step together. So I hope you guys are doing that because that's part of our goals for the webinar. This is what I'm suggesting as your next step. And this is how I found mine. You're going to take the list that you created and you're going to, number 2, cross-reference it with your insurance website. This is a pain in the ass, but this will save you anxiety later. So if you have a list of 5 to 10, to the side, I'd open up another screen, and you don't have to do that today, but this is what you're going to jot down as your next step. You're going to pull up your insurance website, and you're going to type in the names that you wrote down to see who your insurance covered, right? So this is going to filter that list down a little more. And after that, I want you to cross-reference with online reviews. So you're going to have a short list after you see who is actually covered by your insurance, and then I would look at the reviews. And I wrote down a few websites that you'll find doctor reviews, because when you go into Google, you type in the name of the doctor, and I usually write reviews. These are the ones that come up, and not all doctors are on all of them. So sometimes someone might be reviewed on health grades, but not vitals. But these are, at least you can get a little bit more insight about the doctor. So you got the Rate MDs, vitals.com, ZocDoc, and health grades. And here I usually look for not like how people feel about their billing or about their receptionist, because I know people go on there to complain a lot about that. You're going to look at how people feel the doctor treated them, or if the doctor was listening, because that's important. They should be listening to you. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information, and I just wanted to say that if you're the kind of person who needs a little bit more guidance, so a community or accountability, that's why I created the 12-week mastermind, because I know, I think at that time in my life when I felt so desperate and lonely, this is the kind of thing I would have wanted. So it's not mandatory. It's just for someone who feels they just need that extra help, or they're not able to carve out time for themselves because of all their obligations. And I wanted to just give you an idea of who that would be for. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you feel like you need more guidance and accountability because you've got too much on your plate, or you feel like you're always caring for other people and you put yourself last, I created this specifically for you. Or you might feel discouraged with noticeable changes in your body that you see or feel, or even with that doctor list that we're creating right now. If you feel overwhelmed about like, well, what and how do I tackle that first? This is going to be for you. And just to how you're going to feel at the end of the mastermind, so that you have an idea of what my goal is in creating it, is I want you to feel, you're going to feel confident and outspoken when meeting with your menopause certified doctor, because I want them to be that. You're not going to feel like you're being gaslit, because you're going to feel confident about what you're going through. You'll feel relieved understanding what your body's current and future heart, muscle, bone needs are, and that you'll be taking care of them. You're going to be proud that you've doubled your step count, because keeping your body moving is going to be an ingrained habit. You'll have spent 12 weeks adding strength training into your life, which is going to be very important for your muscle and bone, and you're not going to want to give it up. And you're going to know how to add enough protein and water into your daily nutrition habits, and understand how important they both are for your health after menopause. And this is just like a little overview of what I'm going to be covering. So in the first month, because I'm going to start the mastermind on October 23rd, we're going to take a deeper dive into physiology. So we're going to identify your personal symptoms, create your short list of docs, which we have covered now, because I hope you did put some names down. And then there's going to be a live instruction section and Q&A with a menopause certified gynecologist. So if you have specific questions to ask that you want to run through her before you meet your doctor, you're going to have that opportunity. And then I'm going to start you on the stage 1 of the fitness pillar, which is strength and steps. And then in the second month, which is going to purposely start around the holiday season, is we're going to cover food. And this is important at this time, because I know during the holidays, a lot of us kind of lose whatever our regular habits are. And during this second month, there'll be a live session also with a menopause focused certified nutrition coach. Also, we're going to together with her advice dial in on the water and protein intake so that you can maintain that as a daily lifestyle. And then continue on to stage 2 of the fitness pillar and continue to build on your step goals. And then the last month, which is going to be around Christmas time through the new year, you'll have a live session with me talking about strength training, covering some education on that, and then continue on. Basically, this is your mastery month, tying in all the things for during the whole mastermind. So I just want to remind you that now is the time where you have to take care of you. This is not a dress rehearsal when it comes to our health. It's like, depending on if you're in 40s or 50s, like we don't have time for redos anymore. The 12-week mastermind is going to be dedicated totally to you. And I created it because I was thinking about what I had wanted. So I had time and guidance in a thoughtful learning structure so that this perimenopause journey can feel enlightened, so that you have body knowledge, you feel empowered with healthy actions, you're establishing crucial habits that you're going to keep with you post-menopause. And it's going to be with an intimate community of women who are going to be going through exactly the same thing. And who are also going to be working on carving out time for themselves. So there's going to be accountability and action, and it's going to be an opportunity to get the care you've been giving everyone else, but not yourself. And you're probably like, well, how much is it? And I just wanted to thank you for coming to this webinar. Because of that, I'm going to extend a 20% private invitation discount for all my webinar friends. And it's going to be available for $2,000 for the 12 weeks of the hands-on expert guidance, the accountability, and the structured and fitness and nutrition program. And for the next 4 days, it's going to be that private discount. And then on Monday, the 16th, I'm going to open it up to the public on at $2,500. And Coach Michelle will drop the sign-up link in the chat in case you're interested. Remember, this is the kind of thing for a person who feels like they really need some guidance and community during this time. And I just want to go through a summary of what we covered today so that it kind of ties everything up together to remind you. Number one indicator you're in perimenopause is that your periods have changed. They're shorter, they're longer, they're heavier, they're lighter. They're no longer the way they used to be. Remember that perimenopause can last between 2 and 10 years, and it's going to be different for everyone, but the average is 4 to 5. So it can start in your early 40s, it can start in your mid 40s, it can start in your late 40s. And then after your whole perimenopause fluctuation, because then your period's going to be wavering and eventually it'll slow down. When you don't get your period for a year, you're officially post-menopause. And reviewing the symptoms, the most notorious, of course, are the hot flashes, night sweats everyone talks about, but not everyone's going to have that. And it can range from headaches, weight gain, insomnia, like I said, thinning hair, change in libido, anxiety, depression. There's a lot of things you have to just think about statistically where you are. Like, if you're in your 40s, your periods have changed and you start getting the symptoms, you can pretty much associate the two. And understand that the symptoms are due to the fluctuations you saw on the graph between estrogen and progesterone, but estrogen, it has the greatest influence in terms of what's causing your symptoms. And in terms, the summary of getting through this period is focusing on your physiology, so understanding what's going on in your body so you know how to advocate for yourself, food and fitness. And these 3 things are going to be so important for how your body feels and is post-menopause, because those changes are really going to affect things in your a lot of things, from, like I said, muscle to bone to heart health. And it's important to know that that's what's going to happen. And finally, your homework, the next step after the webinar, and I want to make sure you do this, is finding your medical ally. I don't know how everyone feels about their current doctor, but I can tell you I had to go through a few before I found ones that who are menopause educated. That person is going to give you the right remedies and make you feel like you're not nuts, that whatever you share is not something that's just in your mind. So I want you to take the short list we created, cross-reference it with your insurance and online reviews, and then make an appointment. You might not like the first person that you met, but you will find someone. The most important thing is that they have menopause education. And that means it's a doctor that is going to start with you now, and you can stay with them for, for as long as you want to stay with them. And you don't have to leave just because you no longer have, are within childbearing years. And so you know what to expect after we're going to go into the Q&A shortly. I'm going to send out a replay of tonight's webinar because I've had a few people ask. And in the email, I'll have the replay and then just detailing the private invitation for the mastermind. And just know that the $500 discount it'll expire on Sunday night. And then Coach Michelle also put the link in the chat. So thank you for so patiently listening to all this stuff. I want to say thank you so much for your time. And just know the fact that you're here, that you're not alone, that all these things, it's a normal part of a woman's life. And I know some of it's a pain, but it's like, oh, why do we have this? But you know what? We're the stronger sex. So we're going to go on to the live Q&A. I think Coach Michelle has aggregated. Are there any questions, Coach Michelle? I'm going to stop sharing this so I can put myself on.
Oh, I can see everybody.
Hi,
nice?
everybody.
So there were a few questions, mostly from the beginning.
Okay.
And then if anybody has any other questions, I just see there's a couple more rolling in. So let me just.
Oh, fantastic.
So one of the things is curious about how movement and exercise during perimenopause and general recommendations for movement during this period of change. So,
yep.
For example, hearing that like cardio contributes to stress on the body, maybe is that contributing to irregular cycles? And what are some general recommendations?
Okay, so it's a good big question. So I think it depends on person. So I can tell you that part of the reason people also are getting weight gain at this time, besides the hormonal changes, is I think because of this time of life between kids and career and also working from home. I know for a fact, because whenever I start working with someone, people are moving a lot less. So the question first I would ask is, and when you pull up your phone, tell me what your step count is. So one of the things that I'm going to work on in the mastermind is doubling someone's step count, not necessarily right away, but I'll give you an example. I'm always not surprised. It is not abnormal for someone to have less than 3,000 steps every day. And that would be the first thing that I tackle before all the other things. If you're someone who's already moving regularly, I think you don't need to stress about, let me think how to, so strength training is going to be important because of our hormonal changes. And from here on out for the rest of our lives, we need to be strength training. In terms of that combination of strength and cardio, I think we're probably it's getting too much. So the first thing I think is focus on your steps and your strength. And unless whoever asks that wants to add into the chat, like what specifically they're asking, like, are they afraid they're doing too much cardio and not enough strength? You can't have just strength. You also can't have just cardio. It's like everything else in life that your mom will tell you, you need to have a balance.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. Is there a way to predict in advance what perimenopause symptoms you're likely to see?
Oh, that's a good question. So from what I understand, in terms of when menopause is going to happen, if you have a sibling, like as in a sister, you and your sister are going to be more similar on when you hit menopause. And that has to do with you're in similar upbringing in terms of the kind of food you have, the environment you are, more so than with your mom. In terms of symptoms, I don't think so. Like my mom had told me she suffered a little bit of insomnia. I don't think she suffered the way I had. She had some light hot flashes. I never had hot flashes. So I think it's still going to be very individual in terms of symptoms. Let me add in something else that I do understand. Someone's childhood, I think Laura and I, we were just at this menopause conference, and Dr. Denisha had talked about this. Research has shown if you've had trauma in your childhood, any kind of traumatic childhood will affect your menopause symptoms, as in you will have it more severe than someone who didn't have that kind of trauma. So there is a psychological effect in terms of symptoms. Like, so I guess you can think stress levels.
Right. How can we best support our bone density?
Oh, such a good one. Two things. I know we always talk about strength training, but also plyometrics. A good book, if you want to read more on that, is by Dr. Stacy Sims. And the book's called Next Level. She writes from a standpoint as a researcher who looks at research only done on women. So not like, oh, this is good for like where it's just done on 20-year-old white males. 20-year-old young males. So she looks at research in terms of athletics and physical things done on women. And because she is also postmenopause, a lot of her research that she writes about is on that age group. And one of the important things she talks about in terms of bone density, besides strength training, and she's not talking about a lot of reps lightweight, she means having lifting heavy days, and that could be different for every person, but also adding some kind of plyometric to your exercise routine. And that doesn't have to mean like you're doing box jumps, but things where even like a little light jump rope, because that impact helps your bone density because you're moving your bones against gravity.
Thank you. Another question. So how to judge symptoms? So for folks who maybe have had a partial hysterectomy or a full hysterectomy, other symptoms to look for besides irregular periods, would it be typically the same, or would it be different than folks who have not experienced that?
It will be different. And this is where you need the menopause certified gynecologist who's going to be much more up on that and more up to date on the subtleties of what you might experience. Because I had someone ask me, well, how do I know if I use an IUD, so I did pronounce it, like a Mirena, which makes it so that you don't have a period. I had someone ask me that, and I actually asked Dr. Nish, I'm like, oh yeah, how does one know if you're not getting your period, if it's that time? And she said it makes it a little bit more complex, but it's going to probably partly be statistically how old you are, and then if you're seeing other symptoms. So in that case, the period might not be your biggest indicator, it would be the symptoms, and having a doctor who knows what they're doing.
And then speaking of birth control or IUDs, for folks who have been put on birth control to help control irregular periods and then still having other symptoms, is birth control considered to be a form of HRT? And then there was some other questions about like HRT in general. So I don't know if you just want to.
That I'm not sure about. I think that would have
Okay.
to be a gynecologist answer. But yeah, I can see why that the question is, because you're getting hormones. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Great. And somebody just said that that answered their question. So
Oh, okay. Oh, you mean about the symptoms? Okay.
yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that was when I asked Dr. Dean. She's like, yeah, so it's going to be a little bit more subtle. It's the symptoms that's going to be your indicator. And then feeling like, how old am I? I think if you don't have a sibling, then in that case, when I asked my mom when she went through menopause, that's going to be your next best family history information when your mom went through it. And some people, don't even go through menopause or like stop their period way, way late into the late 50s. So everyone's a little different. Is that all our questions?
Yep. And I think the other one was kind of looped in with some of the other ones about, is it possible to have symptoms and be like still have regular cycles, like, is there a chicken and the egg? Like, do you
Yeah.
typically have irregular cycles and then the symptoms show up, or do you maybe have some other symptoms and then the irregular cycles show up, or could it be either
So
way?
I think my friend had wrote, she's like, I'm getting regular cycles, but they're changing. So I think what she meant is I'm still getting my period, but what's happening is changing. So I think your best bet is to look at your period, because if that's changing, then that's probably going to be simultaneous, because the symptoms come with the fluctuation. So it's probably, I don't know if it's like one comes, they're probably going to come around the same time.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's something where maybe you notice something before, even though it's the hormone changes are happening.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. Like feeling it
Yeah,
a little different, and then your period use. Yes. So it's gonna be like
yeah.
it won't be like a huge gap between the two.
Excellent. And somebody just said in the chat about the birth control being HRT, and their
Yeah.
doctor said that it was different, or they think it's
Oh, was
different because their doctor said they were too young, so he recommended birth control.
okay. Oh, for the person who wrote that, how old are you? If you could, I'm
Oh,
so curious.
I
Oh,
missed
gotcha.
this one.
Oh,
Hmm.
I don't know if that's you. 'Cause I was just think, you mean, oh, too young to be taking HRT. Uh, Down east, is your doc menopause certified? I'm so, after my experience with the doctors, I'm so pro, like you, some doctors might know a little bit more, but like literally, if they're Menopause Society certified, because I haven't talked to Dr. Nisha, she said the test to pass that was quite hard. Like you really had said that it's not just a certification, like pay for it and you get it. They have to take a written test, and they have to pass that test, so that your doctor, if they're menopause certified, really knows the information. Oh,
Oh,
Dionysia, your doctor said to tough it out. What the? Oh, on the
development.
wait. Okay, I didn't see that. Let me see what that message. Whoop. Um, I don't think it's a bad. It never hurts to doctor shop and to make an appointment with somebody who is off of the North American Menopause Society list. Um,
There was one more question and I almost missed it.
yeah, yeah.
What did your doctor recommend about hair thinning? About
Oh,
thinning
let me tell.
hair?
Yes. Okay. This is very valuable information for all of you. I know people will talk about supplements and everything, and maybe that will work. But like, for all supplements, it's not FDA regulated. There's not like testing and stuff on it. And because it's not FDA regulated, you don't know. You don't know. So what she said to use is Rogaine. And she like the, and I can tell you Rogaine works, but you have to be consistent. You have to put it on in the morning and you have to put it on the night, and it slowly does help hair growth. And I can tell, so that's what my doctor said, my menopause certified gynecologist. And when I told her, I was like, sometimes I forget to use it. And she said, you shouldn't, because it works, because her daughter, who's a teenager, had some kind of infection or viral infection and lost a lot of her hair. So she, as a mom, will put it on her daughter. She's like, it works. So the answer is Rogaine. Let's see. Are there any
Um,
more questions, friends?
let's see. No? Any more questions? Just in case I missed something. There was a flurry of questions that came in at one point, so I just want to make sure.
Okay. I could talk about insomnia forever. I literally went through so much in trying to get off Ambien and working with a sleep psychologist. FYI, in case anyone goes through insomnia, a sleep psychologist is your best bet. It's not going to be the cheapest, because I'm not sure if some insurance will cover it, but the sleep psychologist, literally, that is the only thing they deal with. They only deal with sleep issues, and they know what they're doing. And the way they work is changing your thought patterns. So it's called CBTI because it's changing your thought patterns about how you sleep. And like everything we do in life, it's our thought pattern about it is what affects it. Like we were talking about the severity of symptoms. If someone grew up with trauma, their severity of symptoms is going to be worse than someone who did not grow up with that. And it's probably due to anxiety and thought patterns. All right. Well, my friends, I'll be sending out an email with the replay and an invitation to the mastermind. And I would love for you to join me if you feel like you need that extra help and guidance. And if you've got any other questions, you've seen my email, so feel free to pop them to me. I love talking about this stuff. I can make it into a post to answer your question. So yes. Oh, good. Laura, I'm so glad it was informative. I wanted it to be informative, or at least have you guys know where to start. And the first place I say to start is always finding the right doctor, and everything else you have more control over, but the doctor is going to really give you some valuable information and knows the current research. Thank you, everybody.
Tina, one more question did just come
Oh,
in.
sure.
Just before we go, are there any recommendations for women with trauma to prevent worse symptoms? Like, is there anything that folks can do?
So I'm a huge proponent on so not even just for sleep, but cognitive behavioral therapy. I think is very helpful because it's therapy, it's talk therapy. It depends on how everyone operates, but I prefer that. I think therapy is going to be really important. And I like cognitive behavioral therapy because when you talk to your therapist, you're getting action items. So you might talk about your thought patterns, and the therapist will give you a suggestion. How about when this happens, you do this? And it's not just talking about what happens, but it's um, uh, unfolding the things, the thoughts, but also giving you something to do. No more questions, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me on a Wednesday night. I forgot what night it was. All right. I'm going to pop off here. And remember, you guys, thank you. If you guys need anything, send me an email, and I'll send you guys an email tonight. All right. Have a good night.